Hello, my name is John Brink, and today we are from beautiful downtown Prince George, in the center of British Columbia, in northern British Columbia, in the capital of the north, as I call it. And with us today, a very, very special guest, and his name is Mayor Lyn Hall.
Hello, John. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, thank you for having you.
What a great spot in downtown Prince George, and you know your view is almost as good as mine from City Hall.
And as Lyn looks towards me, you can see his office right behind me.
And like you said, you're checking on me, making sure I'm working. Exactly.
So, you mind if I call you Lyn?
Not at all. No, that's perfect.
So again, it's a beautiful day in Prince George, beautiful fall day, and all the beautiful colors all around us. Tell me a little bit about your past, Lyn.
Well, I was born and raised in Dawson Creek. My family came from Saskatchewan and Manitoba and settled there probably in the mid-30s. My grandfather brought his family out. And so I have a sister, and that's where we were raised. I went to school, graduated from there. In my early years working, I worked for the refinery in Dawson Creek. Just a summer job. Make a few bucks to go back to university. Went to Simon Fraser and the University of Victoria, and then came back to Dawson Creek. As much as while I was growing up in Dawson, it was a city of about 13,000 people. And always thought, I would probably move away. But I didn't, not until I was about 29 years old. It was a great place to live.
So what did you take at university?
Well, I was kind of all over the map. Took a little bit of economics, a little history, and that's kind of what I focused on.
And did you have a particular idea in mind in terms of a career, or what your dad was maybe doing, or?
I didn't. My dad was an accountant, and that's he worked at that for a number of years. And I didn't have anything really in mind. I thought about teaching. Didn't think a whole lot about following in my dad's footsteps as an accountant. Ended up in the real estate business actually in Dawson Creek for a number of years.
As a realtor?
And really enjoyed it. And the market was good. It was an interesting time in Dawson Creek.
And that was around?
That would have been late 70s, early 80s.
They went through some tough times.
They did. Farming community, John, as you know. And so you sort of, rose and fell with the prices of grain prices, commodity prices. Unlike Fort St. John, where they were really resource driven.
Exactly.
And we had, so I stayed there till I was about 29, and then met my wife and moved to Prince George.
Where did you meet your wife?
Here in Prince George.
Here in Prince George. Her name was?
Lorrelle.
Lorrelle. And, so you met her in Prince George, and then were you then already in Prince George, or did you meet her going to?
No, I was still working in Dawson Creek, and I thought, we just decided that we were going to make Prince George our home. She had a lot of family here, and ironically, I had about 25 members of my extended family here in Prince George as well, so it was a nice fit. And it was like moving from a smaller home to a bigger home when I came over, and I worked for ICBC for a little while. And then
as a loan officer? Or?
No, I was with ICBC in the claims area. The insurance corporation. And then for a number of years, worked for the BC Gaming Commission. And that's sort of where my career ended and then I ran, as you know, for mayor in 2014.
But first you went to school board.
Yes, I was on the school board, and
for quite a while. Right?
Yes, 10 years.
10 years. That's a long time.
It is a long time. In 2001, I came in the by-election. And then decided in early 2010 that would be my last year, and I ran for council in 2010.
And so you ran the council for 2010. That was the first time you ran?
No. Actually, it wasn't. I had run in 1996 and 99.
Okay, and you did?
Was not successful.
Oh.
A strong group of candidates. And, I was new to town. Not a lot of people knew me. I had spent a lot of time, early on in my time here in Prince George, I did a lot of volunteer work.
Yeah.
And I think one of the ones that really stands out the most for me is I was on the Child Development Center board.
Yeah.
And that's a
Good organization.
great organization.
Yeah.
John really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Got to know a tremendous amount of people. And Ted Moffat was on the board then, and Horst Sander.
Yeah.
And it was a real learning experience for me.
Yeah. And then, so then looking at city council and it kind of brought you into the political process in a way, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Even when I was on the school board, unfortunately, we went through some difficult times, had to close a number of schools.
Yeah. Very difficult time.
Very difficult time, heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
I'd never been through anything like that.
No.
And that started very early in 2002 and 3.
Yeah.
And never ever expected that we would be making those kinds of decisions.
What was underlying all of that? Was it the economy at the time, or?
Yeah, and it was the student population had decreased.
Yeah.
There weren't as many kids attending the K-12 system.
Yeah.
There was a change in funding. Originally, the schools were funded as a building.
Yeah.
And then they went to per student funding.
Yeah.
And that changed the whole landscape of education.
Yeah.
And so you take a look at per student funding, it then becomes a situation that you just can't economically run a school that's half full.
No.
You can't do it.
No, can't be done.
So you saw closures and amalgamations.
Yeah. So that was in early 2001, 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that I remember, from a business perspective, in 2006, then the city, it came back a bit in the mid 2000s. And then what happened is the economy, and me being a part of the forest industry and in this community being attached to the forest industry a lot, we had a bit of a downturn that became a semi-recession, if you wish. 2006 it started. Yeah. And then 2007, 2008, 2009, but also tough years.
And that had an impact as well on schools because the minute that economic downturn started to happen, people started to move away, and we didn't have people moving into town and people moving away to find work. And of course, if mom and dad are moving or dad's leaving, the kids are going.
And the population
declined. And then
property
values declined, and then we had a steady decrease in student populations.
Yeah.
So it was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And I recall one meeting we were at Lyn Hall, and we were determining the fate of about 8 or 9 schools. There was around, it's been a while now, but I would think 500 or 600 people.
Yeah.
And we are a small enough community that you recognize those folks. Some of them,
heartbreaking.
Oh, heartbreaking. And the school in a neighborhood is really the heart of the neighborhood.
No question about that.
And those were really, really difficult decisions. And I remember too going out to smaller communities, John, like Hickson.
Yeah.
Dunster, McBride, Mackenzie.
Yeah. School was the center of the town, right?
It was. So two things in any community, but particularly small communities, no different than when I grew up in Dawson Creek, where it was the church or churches and the schools were the center of the community. They were a gathering place for folks.
No question about that. You couldn't imagine without it, really.
No.
It became very emotional and very, very disturbing. So then going through that, so now you were in your first term in 2011, and then so from there on in, so now kind of you became you were a councilor then, and then you chose to run into 2014, and you were successful in becoming mayor.
That was a big decision.
Yeah.
When I left the school board in 2010, I was approached by folks who had supported me through my time on the school board and suggested that I should run for council.
Yeah.
So as I do all the time, and I know people say, well, that's what a lot of politicians will say, but I did. I talked about it with my family.
Well, yeah.
Because obviously it was an important time for us. The kids were still young.
Everybody be affected by it.
Yeah. And the one thing I will say, my time on the school board and even on council didn't detract my time away from my family. It was important that they were still the focus.
Yeah.
So very supportive, decided to run for council and was successful. Just carried on.
Yeah.
And the decision to run for mayor in 2014 was equally as hard.
Yeah.
It was a very difficult decision.
Because now you knew this was not going to be a walk in the park. This was going to be a city in motion and in demanding.
We were starting to come back, I would say, from some difficult years. And I take a look at where we were from a provincial perspective, where we were regionally. And we were always looked upon by other communities throughout the region. And you said earlier, we're in the central of BC. I think the only more central location, and is smack dab in the middle of the province, is Vanderhoof.
Yeah.
And the mayor there is quick to tell me that he's in the center of the province, not us.
I like it. He's a good guy.
Jerry's a great guy. Yeah. And the reality sets in that you're wanting the job to really determine, along with the 8 councillors, where the city goes.
Yeah.
And it was an important decision, tough decision.
Interesting times, though, Lyn, same as you do, is that if I look back when I came here in 1965 off the bus, couldn't speak the language, didn't know soul, at $25.47 and no job, within a block from here, the old Greyhound station, and then here where we are sitting now as one of the totally changed streets being George Street. It was then virtually all bars and hotels and a place where you wouldn't want to walk too much around on Friday evenings because you never know what's going to happen next. And the normal conversations would be, when did you get here and when are you leaving? So that was Prince George. And I look now at 2014 when you became mayor. It had gone through some difficult times, but from that point forward, if I look at 2014 to 2021, some tough years, but it has probably been a period from which I know in the 56 years that I've been here, there has never been as much going on in the city, in the region, than there has during your period of mayor.
And I appreciate that, and I thank you for that comment, John. For me, it was about a few things. The question was, what are you going to do about downtown? Well, for me, downtown was historic. George Street was historic. What can we do downtown? And we're in a complex right now that's smack dab downtown. We have another condo unit being built, the Hyatt Place Hotel. We've got a new pool. We've got student housing. And it was important for me to work to build those kind of amenities in our downtown. And
right behind us, the amazing swimming pool.
Oh, the pool, yes.
Amazing.
It's incredible. And we have a real opportunity now to do something in demolition of the old fire hall and the Four Seasons pool. But the other thing that was important is, how do we connect ourselves to the economy? And forestry was always and will be the foundation of our economic strategy. So how do we tie ourselves to that? How do we benefit from that? And we knew that the resource sector was starting to, rebound a bit. A lot of discussion about LNG, a lot of mining discussion. And it was really important for us to focus on being a distribution center for those resource sector. And I think that the community has really come a long ways as that part of the business, being able to service the resource sector. But I also wanted to make sure that we put Prince George on the provincial map.
Exactly.
It was important again. We're the largest city north of Kamloops.
Correct.
And 50+% of the province is in our backyard.
Exactly.
And I wanted to let other communities know, John, that we're here to help you. We want to be your partner. We don't want to take anything away from you. And I think it was Colin Kinsley that really coined the phrase, as Prince George goes, so does the rest of the North. As the North goes, so does the Prince George.
Correct. And so does the province.
Exactly.
You know, because more than 80%, I believe, of the GDP, the gross product of the province comes from Northern BC.
And we've been intent on, over the years, no matter what government is in power, both provincially and federally, to say, look, your economic breadbasket is here in the north.
Yeah. Yeah. So whenever the opportunity presents itself, I always present it as, you know, the capital of Northern British Columbia, and you know, and that's where it is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't always fully appreciate it, but more and more so all the time, I believe, Lyn. If you look around Prince George, and especially if you look out of the window, we see all the colors of fall and all the things here around Prince George, all the lakes, I don't know, thousands of lakes within a very short distance around us. And especially with COVID all around the world, we look at Prince George and saying, my God, it doesn't get any better, does it?
I don't think it does. It's, as you have done, I've done a lot of traveling, and I'll tell you, it's just comforting to come home.
Yeah, me too. I look out of the window. Yeah. I usually sit at the window in the planes that I fly in, and then I look outside, it's just paradise.
Yeah.
It simply doesn't get any better.
And I think the other thing too, John, and you've noticed this, I mean, especially with your business, is that a big thing was to retain that young workforce.
Yeah.
So you could go to school, you could graduate, you could go to the college, you go to university, you go to trade school.
Yeah.
And you had opportunity here. That was so important. And, you know, I know a multitude of young kids that have stayed here, and they love it here.
And the other part about it, Lyn, you know, the other day I was in a setting, I forget now where it was, but we had about 4 or 5 people around the table, all parts of Brink, the Brink group of companies, and then somebody else was sitting there as well that was part of it. And we looked around the table and we said, these are all people that are got their studies at UNBC. Every single one of them, and you know, and a lot of them stayed, you know. So and that was another part that happened. UNBC changed the Prince George region and Northern BC. The other part, obviously, the College of New Caledonia, an amazing organization. And one of the other parts that I've talked to you before about that, I believe that still that you know, that with industry changing, not only the forest industry but all industry, we need to develop the skill sets. We have to develop research and development in terms of how do we go further in developing equipment that can make products for new markets and do it all here. And I believe one of the things that I've been pushing very hard on is the a kind of a center of excellence, which would be a BCIT of the North. Companies like Canfor have supported it, and it is something that I believe would be the next step to making sure that we have the workforce for the new industries that will be developed and are here in our community, because a lot of the schooling down south, BCIT being one of them, they are so many people involved and so large that I think the next step is to see that in here.
And I think your organization is a good example. The forest sector, and you can speak to this a lot better than I can, but you have to be nimble and ready to change and ready to adapt. To whatever the market is doing, or whatever the need is. And I think that I've obviously seen a lot of that take place in the forest sector over the last probably 10 years, I guess. It's
interesting part about the forest industry is, Lyn, as you well know, if you look back to the 50s, late 40s and 50s, around Prince George there were 600 sawmills. And say, well, how could that possibly be? Well, they were in the bush. The sawmill, usually the smaller mills, would go to the bush, and then they would cut the lumber, put it on strips, and then they go to planer row. Now called River Road, and that's where all the planers were. They were negotiating about selling their wood, so they could pay their employees, and then going fast forward. Then when it started consolidating is, in the early 60s and mid-60s, and then into the 70s, and gradually it became more and more, fewer and fewer companies that and it became then a changed industry. Today, I believe we are there again at a period in the history of the forest industry where obviously we have less trees available because of pine beetle, spruce beetle, fires, and a number of other things, so that the volume available is much smaller than it was before, at least for the midterm and the long term.
Yeah.
But the industry is still very vibrant, very much part of our economy here. And doing more secondary manufacturing where we can do more with the fiber. And I believe that's what we will see as we go forward, is an industry that that is making more from the product, that is more intensive forestry, that we can grow more timber per hectare, and all those things. And it's an industry in transition.
It's funny, you talk about the 600 mills of various sizes throughout the north. When I was living in Dawson Creek as a young teenager, my buddy's dad owned a small mill.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I got a job in the summer working on the green chain, piling lumber. And I remember usually we would be, done work because we had to go back to school in, probably mid-September.
Yeah.
And he came to us one day and he said, hey, why don't you guys stick around and work a little bit for me on the weekends over the winter?
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know that I want to work that green chain in the middle of winter in Dawson Creek.
Yeah, yeah.
It's 30 below and 6 feet of snow. So he said, well, how about you learn how to use, a forklift?
Yeah.
And I said, well, what would I be doing? Well, you're going to take that load of 2x4s, you're going to put it on the forklift, and you're going to go up this ramp to the deck, and you're going to load the rail cars. And the deck was probably 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and I had never run one before, so I played around with one in the parking lot and in the back 40 of the mill, and so sure enough I said, okay, I'll give this a whirl. And John, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And working most often we're working night shift, midnight to 8, but just the opportunity.
Yeah.
And to understand the mill operation. And this wasn't a very big mill.
No.
And that was my last job at the mill in Dawson Creek, was loading rail cars on this, and it wasn't a brand new forklift.
Yeah.
It was pretty beat up.
Yeah, it was one of those
you grab the bundle and go up to the, on the deck and load it up, and away you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gave you good experience from, kind of hands-on, if you wish,
Yeah, it showed that it was really good for me, actually. And it's interesting because I look back on it now and I think, wow, it was really a grounding for me, and a little bit of grounding in the forest industry, because logs would come in, logs would be produced and shipped out. Yeah, done.
Now the other part, coming back a little bit to the politics and all of those kind of things, clearly, during your tenure and somewhat before, but especially during your tenure. And with the fires that we had all around us, Prince George took on a leadership role and making sure that whatever we could do to assist bringing a lot of people into Prince George and making sure that they were taken care of during this difficult period.
Yeah, that was a tough time. In 2017, we had around 10,000 people here.
Yeah.
And when I think about it, that's roughly the same size as my hometown.
Yeah.
And when they came to town, we committed to them and to government that we would in fact give them exactly what they needed.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that we could house them. We wanted to make sure that they had meals and transportation and health care.
Yeah.
And it was a challenge.
Yeah.
But a tremendous amount of work, and
it came off amazing, though.
And what we weren't really prepared for was the amount of national coverage we got. CBC, CTV, global news.
Yeah.
And day in and day out wanting to know where we were at, how were we managing to do this. And I think they really, everybody talks about the 2015 Canada Winter Games putting us really on the sports map.
Yeah.
But I would say 2017 was equally as important for us.
No question about that.
And it was good to be able to show off our community and show off the volunteers and show off everything we did.
A whole new appreciation
Absolutely.
of the North, so.
But it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's no question
Heartbreaking
about it.
times,
No
and the
question.
people that I met, but they were taken care of, and they were very, very happy about that.
Devastating, what happens during those periods, right?
Yep.
To families and to all the things that are important to their homes, their jobs, everything around them, and their whole life is upside down.
Mom and Dad and 3 kids showed up from the Quesnel, Williams Lake area, and very strong when they showed up at CNC to be registered and told, here's where you can go, and on and on. And I remember just seeing them as they came in, introduced myself, chatted a bit. They went down and sat with somebody to get registered. And Dad barely sat down and just absolutely broke down.
Yeah.
And I think it was about him knowing that he had to care for his wife and his kids.
Yeah.
And he didn't know, and as it turned out, things worked out not badly for them. They did lose some property.
Yeah.
But he didn't know if he had a home to go back to.
Yeah.
And how do I take care of a wife
Exactly.
and my children?
Yeah, everything there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Devastating.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Prince George showed real leadership then. And so the way I've always looked at Prince George is that, that there are very good relationships with the surrounding regions and all the different communities, including First Nations, Clayton HNA and McLeods and all the communities together. It's an amazing northern community, and I look at Prince George as being the leader of that and looking forward even more so because, respectfully, I always have said that Prince George will become a major center, not necessarily because of the politicians, but in spite of them.
Yeah.
I say that respectfully. You probably heard me say it.
I've heard that lots.
Yeah, but that's kind of tongue in cheek. But I'm very proud of you, what you do in the city and the region. But because Prince George, it's such a natural center because of air, by rail, by road. It cannot be anything else other than.
Yeah, I agree.
And now it becomes a question of, if that is the case, then are we able to build the infrastructure that is required? Swimming pool, universities, colleges, and all the other things that not only attracts the people here, but keeps them here to build their careers. How does it attract entrepreneurial capital? How do we go from being stagnant to recovering or going from the ups and downs? I believe we have reached that period now, Glenn, and as you heard here and in the last couple of days, the forest industry is still a very important part of the economy, obviously not only here but throughout the province and the country, is in transition, and companies like Canfor is a good example. They are in transition and are somewhat reinventing themselves. And there was a major announcement today, I believe, in partnership. Maybe tell us about it a little bit.
Yeah, so Canfor announced that they're going to go into partnership with Arbios, which is really a bioenergy transition for them.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just as you said, John, they're in transition, and I think that they're looking at other ways to add to their operation.
Yeah.
And that's what the forest sector does.
Yeah.
And that announcement is big for Prince George.
Yeah.
We were waiting for the commitment on the financial investment, and that came about.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to see at the end of the day is another opportunity for people to stay here and work, and it'll just add to that forest sector and really in that bioeconomy field. And we're seeing that grow with the pellet industry.
Exactly.
We're seeing it grow in a number of ways, and Canfor has made that move, and I'm it was a good news day for Prince George.
Yeah, and the other part about it too, Lyn, because you must be sitting there as many other people that are in leadership roles in the region and community saying, what's going to happen to the forest industry? Because there's so much negative, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so what we have seen is a lot of the industry has invested in other areas. Canforest being one of them, West Fraser, Interfor, and many other ones in the southeastern United States. Canfor also in Sweden. And so part of that likely, because those are private companies that are public in a lot of cases and are accountable to their shareholders. But looking at BC, it didn't always look too well in terms of declining volumes of timber available, other opportunities, maybe somewhat government involved. And I believe we are now a couple of things have happened because of all of that. Obviously, the sad part of it, probably about 20 mills have shut down, sawmills, because we, from uplifting the volume of timber that we cut to recover as much of the pine beetle as possible, it now has gone down to the normal levels, less some more, and gradually mills have shut down. But we are pretty much to the point now, I believe, that they are kind of balancing out.
I think so. And when you talk about the forest sector and the smaller mills and the smaller communities, it's so important for the mill and the work, as you know, in Vanderhoof to thrive. Chetwynd. Mackenzie's going through some difficult times. And out west along Highway 16. It's important for the entire regional economy for those mills to continue to operate and thrive in those smaller communities.
Yeah, and adding to that a little bit, because I'm an operator, and so we have operations here in Prince George, we have in Vanderhoof, we have it in Houston. We are looking at operations in other places. I can't say too much, but we're looking even at Mackenzie and Fort St. James. And so we believe that we will at least double in size probably in the next 2 to 3 years or before that. So that's kind of how I look at it. And a lot of that is in further manufacturing, secondary manufacturing, and other opportunities. So what now has happened is that the entrepreneurial instinct comes to the front and saying, okay, where are the new opportunities? And then, capital will adapt to it. I believe that we will see companies like Canfor, a good example, believing, showing that they have confidence in where we are going, investing. They are looking, I'm sure they are, from what I know from them, not that I have information that nobody else has, but I believe that they will likely look at other places where they have to invest new capital, and so what we will see is a re-emerging of an industry, and as they go through this strategic change.
Well, it's all about diversification. And I'm glad you mentioned your company, because I was about to. And I think, John, your company under your leadership and your team are really examples of how you've diversified your operation over the last 40 years. I mean, you probably never thought that you'd be doing some of the production you're doing today.
No.
You probably never thought of that even a decade ago.
No.
And that's what happens. And I think that somebody asked me about the forest industry not long ago and what word I would use, and it's probably overused, but it's resilient. That's what it is.
No question about that. No question about it.
I think it always will be.
And what does it look like then on the ground? Actually on the ground, well, people like me that, and I'm a sole owner of the company, and then I lay awake in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and say, what am I going to do tomorrow, kind of thing. And that's exactly what you need. You need, to stimulate the entrepreneurship as people saying, are there opportunities in the industry? No doubt about that. No question about it. And for young people that I talk to, to me it's always simple, but I say, attitude, have a positive attitude. Stay away from negative. Find your passion. Find something that you like to do, and then become good at it. And then from there on, work ethic. But the opportunities are there and British Columbia, and especially in northern British Columbia, in my opinion. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And you and I have talked a lot about the city, and for me, it's about the positive things that are going on in our city and in the region, and how, in many instances, Prince George drives that positivity, and it drives what's happening in the rest of the region. And I know there are difficult things occurring in our community. I'm not blind to that. I get it. And I understand that there are challenges. There's no question about it. But I think there's a weighing of things, John.
Yeah.
And for me, I absolutely need to focus on the challenges. There's no question. But I also need to focus on what we have achieved.
Oh, no question about that.
I said to you earlier that I drive around this city a lot.
Yeah.
And I just can't believe the change I've seen. And yes, COVID has had an impact on the morale of a community, and it impacts individuals in different ways. We want to travel, we want to be social.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we have come a long ways.
And the other part about it, Lyn, is that we recognize it here, but others do as well.
Absolutely.
A lot of people around Canada and money and capital, if you talk to them, they say, look up north.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from good leadership. We see that not only in Prince George and your team, but we see it in Kelowna, we see it in Kamloops, and in the region. And so we have everything that is required to attract capital. The key for us is to make sure that every so often there are difficulties and challenges. That's normal in businesses. That happens all over the place. But in the meantime, looking forward is huge opportunities for us. But we must have good, solid leadership.
I agree.
Yeah,
100%. And when you talk about my colleagues in Kelowna and Penticton and Nanaimo, there's a group of 13 of us, the BC Urban Mayors Caucus.
Yeah.
And it's mayors from the 13 larger cities in the province. And we meet every Friday morning via Zoom.
Yeah.
And we talk about various issues. How can we help each other? But it's not just the 13 of us. If I can walk away with something and pick up the phone to Jerry and Vanderhoof, or Dale in Dawson Creek, Carol out in Terrace, Bob and Walt in Williams, like, that's what it's about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about best practices and utilizing them. And if I hear that Ken is doing something in Kamloops, I think, geez, maybe we can use that in Prince George.
Yeah.
And he'll do the same. That's just the way it is. It has to be that way.
Yeah.
You've got to learn from your partners.
Now, for those people that are listening to us, that I look at the city and we know that, and you're the mayor, but then around the city we have the regional district. And that is structured for, are you on that as well? Yeah,
we are. So we're part of the regional district, and there's myself and 3 other councilors that sit on the regional district board as representatives of the city.
Okay.
And then we have representatives from Valemount, McBride, Mackenzie. We're all, there's representation from the entire regional district in the various areas. Bill Empey from the Pineview area. So the decisions they make there, or what they contemplate, is that, are the budgets involved in all of that? Yeah, there are. And so the regional district is really designed to be that governing body of rural BC. Yeah. So how do we get more money from Ottawa and from BC to get it up? And is that what it does? That's what it does, I guess. And they work closely, as we do, with the provincial government, but their dealings are smaller in size, though more vast in land size. Right. They go all the way to Valemount. Yeah. So it's the jurisdiction is really outside of the municipalities that the regional district deals with. Right. And so you look at Pineview, for example. Yeah. You look at Hickson. Yeah. That's within the regional district. Yeah. And that's the role. Their role is to deal with those rural issues. And then there is another organization that's called Northern Development. Yeah, Northern Development Initiatives Trust. Is that the one you're referring to? Yeah, I'm thinking about, I got one of my notes here, that Northern Development, this one here, and it kind of talks about
you know, but kind of struck my interest about it is that you know, Northern Development Region, this one here.
Yeah. So Northern Development Initiatives Trust, I sit on their regional advisory committee.
Right.
And I sit on their board.
And that represents about 70 or 80% of the province.
Well, it's huge. Yes.
39 communities.
Yeah. So the trusts were established throughout the province when BC Rail was sold.
Right.
And the trust really is there to assist and help out small business, smaller communities, and we have a grant funding system that people can apply to, put in an application for various things through economic development. One of the programs for the downtown is the facade program.
Right.
So there's a multitude of things.
Yeah.
And they are, maybe I'm biased, but they're probably one of the stronger trusts in the province.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to kind of give everybody a bit of a look at saying, how do these all kind of fit together?
So the trust isn't a government. They're not a municipal government or a regional district.
Right.
So they are a trust, and they're a great asset to us.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. When Prince George, when we were looking at downtown revitalization and we were looking at incentives, we went to the Northern Development Trust to talk about what they can provide us as incentives to developers to come to our city.
Right.
And so we work very closely with them, as does the regional district. Yeah. But it also assists those smaller nonprofit organizations. It will work closely with Prince George Airport, the airport in Vanderhoof, and we're really now involved in the transportation corridors. Particularly since we lost Greyhound. How do we provide that public transportation? Community to community is important for us. So they perform a big role when it comes to assisting municipalities and regional districts.
So for you individually, then being involved in, so this is a full-time job and then some, Lyn. Probably two jobs.
Two jobs. So let folks know my day is I am probably in the office by just shortly after 7. And there are times when I'm, kind of rolling in the driveway at home at 8 or 9 at night. And keep in mind, one of the things that you talked earlier, John, about how connected we are across the country. So when it's, when I have somebody in Toronto saying we'd like to meet with you at 9 o'clock our time, you're up at the crack of dawn. And to do that, but you're not going to pass that opportunity up.
No.
So because we have really spread our wings a great deal here in Prince George, and we're working with organizations and companies, and there's developers across the country that are interested in us. We put in some pretty long days. And our economic development office does great work. I can't say enough about them.
So now the key will become, as we from here on in, we go forward, there'll be all kinds of things happening, and the city will likely grow much faster, and the region will. So the challenge will be to have the infrastructure in place in terms of people and managing how those opportunities come to you, and how can you make it work out on the ground.
That's a good point. We're going to see the numbers from Stats Canada early in 2022. I think we're probably somewhere around 4,000 to 6,000 in population increase. But the infrastructure is huge, and as you know, some of the infrastructure is 80 years, 50, 70, 60. It's infrastructure that's been around for a while, and so we're having to plan 3 to 5 years down the road, if not more, for population growth. You look at University Heights, look at your development on North Nechako. That's all part of us having to be ready to provide that infrastructure for developers like you, John. And that infrastructure, both below and above ground, takes a lot of strain. Because our population is growing. So how do we meet that demand?
And then, so like we, like many others, see the opportunities in terms of developing residential, developing commercial, developing industrial, We see warehousing, we want to grow. We have about 300, 400,000 square feet. We want to build that to 1 million square feet.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things happening that we see, and we're only one part of it, and so does everybody else. And then as we drive around and look around, and all I see is say, oh my God, what happened?
Yeah.
You know?
If we just take this small corridor here, you talk about the new pool, this development, the new, we mentioned it all, the student housing, the Hyatt Place. When we started Fire Hall, when we started to talk to developers about that, John, it was then our engineers had to go to work and say, okay, how does our infrastructure, so water, sewer, facilitate these big projects, and still be able to look after the Telus building, the Ramada, the Kaig. So then it's
complicated because what we see is on the ground, but underneath is amazing amount of infrastructure that has to accommodate that.
So the Hyatt Place comes in, no different than Park House development, and they want water. They want the toilets to flush.
Well, obviously,
so then that's when you start to take a look at what you have to do to rebuild infrastructure.
And that is a sizable job. That's not easy stuff. The other part, Lyn, so are you going to run again for mayor? Or?
Yeah, well, you know, here's what I do. No, good question.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, you're not putting me on the spot. I have said that I would really like to. And again, every election, so this year at Christmas, because there's an election in 2022, my wife and daughters will have that conversation. But I'm still excited about the job. I love the job, and I just see so much more potential that I want to work towards. So
see, what is critical is to have stability in leadership, and especially when you go through a period of accelerated growth, which we have during your tenure. And obviously that will likely ramp up as we go forward, and there is nothing more valuable than experience.
And back to your question, you know, I get excited in having a conversation with you about what our city's all about, and that gets me excited knowing that there's an election coming up next year, and it gets me excited about things like that. So it's
well, people like me and others look at it in terms of saying, well, all these things are extremely important. We complain about governments all over the place, but we know for one thing for sure is we have to have leadership, we have to have stability, and you know, the other thing that you know, I know you have 2 daughters, twins,
yes.
And they're very good soccer players. So tell us a little bit about that. And the rest of your family.
So the girls started playing soccer when they were about 7 years old with Prince George Youth Soccer, and then the academy started, and they participated in the academy here for about 3 years, and then they were looking at other areas to go play soccer, but decided to stay at home and ended up playing for the University of Northern BC. And they spent 5 years playing for them. And we are a real sport-orientated family. We love sports. And so my wife was involved on the Youth Soccer Association board, and of course managed some of the soccer teams when I was coaching. And so that's really what our family, we look back on it, and that's a big part of our family, was the soccer.
So what are your daughters? They finished studying UNBC?
Yes, they graduated from UNBC, and I've got a daughter in marketing and communications. And
here in town?
Yes, fortunately the girls are still here. And one daughter is a school teacher.
And
that goes, so for us, Prince George had everything. They could stay here and go to university, play soccer. It was perfect.
Perfect, right? And that's the beauty of Prince George, and it's just evolving and is vibrant, and things are changing here, and you got nature all around you. There is no better place in the world. There's no question.
I agree.
In my mind.
Absolutely agree.
So then being said, you know, anything that you can see, you know, we have the announcement from Canfor, that was a major one. I believe there will be some other ones coming along as well, you know, that...
I think there will be, and, you know, one of the things over my right shoulder is the CN rail yard, and of course I call that our inland port, and the Port of Prince Rupert is growing, and so that means that we'll grow as an inland port.
No question about that.
No question.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see just more growth over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Both from a population to just really the economy.
Yeah.
I think.
And then and taking the leadership of the community that of Prince George, is not only a vibrant community, but it's the leader of the North, and it needs solid management. And if we do that well, which I believe we will, then from there on in, there's no question to the fact that Prince George, will only become even more than it is already. So
I think we've become a big city.
Yeah.
We've grown up to the point where we really have a multitude of options in our city now.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's very good. I just want to make one final comment.
Yeah.
We talked earlier, and in reading your book, I mentioned to you about your journey to Watson Lake.
Yeah.
And my dad spent time in Watson Lake.
You said so, yeah.
In the mid-40s. And I still remember some of the stories, him, telling my sister and I.
Yeah.
About his time there. I think he was there for maybe a couple of years.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I was there for 5 years between 67 and 72.
Yeah.
And in '67 I only was here for 2 years, and my dream was I wanted to build a sawmill, and I had an option to got a challenge to manage a mill in Watson Lake, Lake Lumber, and I would get 1/3 of the ownership.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a guy coming out of Holland, and all about Watson Lake because of your dad? That I've seen it there 64 below.
Yeah.
It snows in July, and he says that early or is it late? But
people would come from the north, like Watson Lake and Fort Nelson, down to Dawson Creek because it was a little bit warmer, John, and not as much snow.
and then for those that are watching and that are not overly familiar with it, Dawson Creek is mile 0 on the Alaska Highway.
Yeah.
Watson Lake was mile 640.
Yeah, Dawson Creek, that's
nearly 1,000 kilometers further north.
Yeah, Dawson Creek, that was their claim to fame, is the mile 0.
Mile 0.
Yeah.
Amazing country, where we
Amazing.
are.
And
we're so lucky.
Oh.
And Canada, BC, it simply doesn't get any better.
Doesn't get any better.
Lyn,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was
Appreciate
fantastic.
having you.
Thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed it.
Me too.
Thank you.
Yeah.